let's break down every quarterback, every tight end for week 4 of 2024 fantasy football and talk about who you need to be starting and who you need to be sitting as we approach the week. Before we do so, let me remind you that Underdog is the place you want to be if you want to get in on additional fantasy football action all season long. Their week 4 pick'ems are already going live. And if you guys want to claim a free pick'em to use towards Thursday night football, Underdog is offering all new customers who sign up with promo code TheCatch a free Dak Prescott over half of a total yard to use towards week 4's action. And don't worry, if you guys watch this video later in the week, you will still receive a free Lamar Jackson over half of a total yard to use towards Sunday's slate of games. So that is a free pick'em no matter what for new customers on Underdog. Plus, Underdog is also going to give you a 50% deposit match up to $1,000 when you sign up with promo code TheCatch. That's up to $1,000 in bonus cash to use towards week 4's pick'ems and those free pick'ems when you sign up with promo code TheCatch. All right, let's kick things off with Thursday night football. We'll have the Cowboys traveling to face the Giants. And Dak Prescott, bad in the first 2 weeks of fantasy football, 11.4 points, 14.9 points, but showed some life. This Cowboys offense showed some life as well against the Ravens. Didn't end up winning that game, but from a fantasy perspective, Dak still had 29.8 fantasy points through 2 touchdowns. He did not turn the football over in this game. No, he had a fumble, but didn't go as a lost fumble. No interceptions, where he threw 2 interceptions in week 2. So he's a quarterback 5 right now in fantasy football at the time recording this, believe it or not. So on the road against the Giants, I don't exactly know what this game script's going to look like. I don't know exactly what the upside here is going to be, but Dak Prescott is still going to be a solid start. I mean, if you have another quarterback who you feel like is a better start, sure, go for it. But even on a short week on the road here, I think Dak Prescott is in the start category. Jake Ferguson was a tight end I talked about. If he's healthy in week 3, he plays. He's got to be a start. 11 targets, 6 receptions, 95 receiving yards, 15.8 yards per catch, and 15.5 total PPR points in week 3. Going up against the Giants this week, Jake Ferguson remains a solid start. Definitely deserves to be in the start category until further notice. Looking at the Giants, let's give him some credit, okay? Daniel Jones is a sit, but let's give him some credit. 18.3 fantasy points in week 2, 19.4 in week 3. No turnovers. Fumble last week, but wasn't a turnover. So maybe the Vikings defense is literally just the best defense in the NFL, and maybe Daniel Jones isn't as bad as we thought. He's finding Malik Neighbors. He's finding Randall Robinson. Devin Singletary has looked good in the last 2 weeks. So I'll give Daniel Jones some credit here, okay? And I think if you're desperate and like super flex double quarterback, you could probably still start Daniel Jones because his Cowboys defense has been really bad the last 2 weeks. But I don't really want to go out of my way to start Daniel Jones. It's been fine the last 2 weeks, but like, are you really going to be forced to start Daniel Jones? Like, maybe there's nothing else out there and you own Justin Herbert. He doesn't play this week. Fine. I just don't want to start him unless I'm absolutely desperate. But I don't want to say that's because he's been bad the past 2 weeks. I just don't really trust him. So Theo Johnson, 2.3 fantasy points. Daniel Bellinger, 2.7 fantasy points. They have combined for a total of 9 targets on the season. We're not starting either of the Giants tight ends moving into the week. All right, let's move along to the Bengals traveling to face the Panthers. And at the time of recording this, Monday Night Football has not been played. It's the only way I can get these videos out for you guys. So I don't know how Joe Burrow has looked tonight against the Commanders, but I'm going to expect it was probably pretty good the way this Washington Commanders defense has played the first 2 weeks of the season. It's a home game for the Bengals. Burrow, I think, will be a solid start once again in week 4 and have a solid day in week 3. Gesicki, on the other hand, I do think is a good stream for week 3. Probably going to be a good stream again in week 4. But it'll be interesting to see with the return of T. Higgins what the volume and targets look like for Mike Gesicki in week 3, and then again in week 4. So still think Gesicki's probably in the streaming radar area. Had a very good game in week 2 against the Chiefs with 16.1 fantasy points. But if my opinions change or something drastic happens like an injury, it'll be in the pinned comment down below. Moving along to the Panthers. Andy Dalton's here, guys. Everything's going to be okay. The bad man's gone. Bryce Young's on the bench. Andy Dalton in this Dave Canales-led Panthers offense is the only quarterback at the time recording this on the season to throw for over 300 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Maybe Joe Burrow does that in Monday Night Football. We'll find out. But Andy Dalton's on the streaming radar. He gets the Bengals, the Bears, the Falcons, and the Commanders in week 7. Pretty good stretch here. Some decent matchups, some okay matchups, and a good matchup. Commanders. So I don't think Andy Dalton's going to have 24.5 fantasy points every single week. I don't know if he's going to throw for 3 touchdowns every single week, but he definitely has to be on the streaming radar because he looked in sync. The connection with the wide receivers on this team looked good, like basically across the entire board. So Andy Dalton, I don't want to get crazy here. We're not starting him over like, true studs or anything, but he's probably got to be close to like that Derek Carr, Baker Mayfield area. Maybe we'll give it another week, but he's definitely worth rostering at the very least. Tommy Tremble, Jatavion Sanders, we're not starting any of these Panthers tight ends. They combined for 4 targets and 5.9 fantasy points in week 3. They're not on the radar in any capacity. Let's move along. All right, let's take a look at the Saints traveling to face the Falcons. Derek Carr kind of gets downgraded here to a streaming candidate. I think he's still a solid stream candidate. This Falcons defense isn't necessarily bad. They held Patrick Mahomes to 17.3 fantasy points in week 3. In the previous week, Jalen Hurts had a pretty good day against them. So, week 1 kind of hard to look at because they played Justin Fields and the Steelers. So kind of tough to read this Falcons defense right now against the quarterback position and kind of as a whole, honestly. But I think Derek Carr, who really disappointed against a bad Eagles defense in week 3 with 8.9 fantasy points, gets downgraded to the streaming area. Like, we're not going to be as confident in Derek Carr moving forward, but he's still the QB7 at the time recording this on the season. Still was very, very good in weeks 1 and 2. But Panthers and the Cowboys, 2 of the worst defenses in the NFL. So let's kind of limit our expectations for Derek Carr moving forward. Still okay to stream, but I don't know if we're going to get that high ceiling of 22.8 fantasy points on a week in, week out basis. Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, Taysom Hill if he plays. Let's just put it this way. Taysom Hill didn't play last week, but those 3 guys combined for 1.2 fantasy points. I don't want anything to do with them. They should not be in your starting lineup in any capacity. Okay, Kirk Cousins in the stream category. It's not a good matchup for him. He's definitely not one of my favorite streamers this week, but if you're desperate, you can throw him out there. Had a passing touchdown and 1 pick last week, 12.1 fantasy points. The week before against Philly, 17.5. Then in week 1 against the Steelers, 8.2. So he's in that streaming area, and that's really about where we have to leave him. He had 2 fumbles in week 3, didn't lose either of them, but they still count against you fantasy-wise. So I don't really feel great about Cousins this week against this Saints defense, but he's certainly a player you can consider if you're desperate enough. We'll just leave it at that. Kyle Pitts, you're probably to start him. I mean, you might have another option on your roster that you like more. Fine. Go for it. It hasn't been great. 11.65 and 7.9. At the time recording this, that still puts Kyle Pitts as the tight end 7 on the year. That's how bad the position has been so far. So I think if you own Pitts, you don't have anything better, you just start him. You take what you can get, and you can cross your fingers for a touchdown. But there's really only so many things we can do at the tight end position going into week 4 of the season. All right, let's move along to the Jaguars traveling to face the Texans. Once again, I have to record these before Monday Night Football, so don't really know what Trevor Lawrence is going to look like in week 3 just yet at the time recording this, but he's been very bad through the first 2 weeks of the season, so he's definitely downgraded to like that streaming area, and I think for Trevor Lawrence, you got to be pretty desperate to start him, and I'm not anticipating a great Trevor Lawrence against this Buffalo defense on the road in week 3. So if my opinion changes or something drastic happens like an injury, it'll be in the pinned comment down below. But I'm pretty you're only starting Trevor Lawrence if you really have nothing better. Okay, Evan Ingram out for week 3. Don't know if he's going to be active for week 4, dealing with that hamstring injury. Brenton Strange, in relief of Evan Ingram, was good in week 2. And we'll go ahead and assume was at least okay in week 3. So I think Brenton Strange on the streaming radar if Evan Ingram does not play in week 4. If Evan Ingram suits up in week 4, then we just go ahead and trust Evan Ingram and roll him out there. But I'd be pretty leery overall about the quarterback and tight end position for the Jaguars in week 4. And quite frankly, I'm pretty leery of the quarterback and tight end position for the Texans as well, as C.J. Stroud continues to struggle. 18.6 points in week 1, 14.3 in week 2, and 11.8 in week 3 against that Vikings defense. Probably the best in the league right now. 2 interceptions and 1 passing touchdown for Stroud. 215 passing yards, his lowest mark of the season. He has not thrown for more than 260 passing yards on the season so far. So, better matchup here in week 4 against the Jaguars. He's in the start category, but he gets the asterisk because you might have a better option. I mean, maybe you drafted a guy with more upside like Jaden Daniels late. Maybe you're in a position where you can stream someone like Sam Darnold or even guys like Baker or Derek Carr who disappointed in week 3. I'm pretty worried about C.J. Stroud from a fantasy standpoint at the moment. We really got to see a higher ceiling before we can just have him as a clear-cut start on a week-in, week-out basis. Still makes the category for the week, but if you have another player at the position that you feel better about, you might want to consider them until we get a better stat line out of Stroud. Dalton Schultz just cannot keep up with, the pass catching on this team when we got Diggs and Collins and Dell in a decent run game on a week-in, week-out basis. So Schultz is a sit. He has not mounted more than 4.6 fantasy points on the season. He had not had more than 3 receptions in a game on the season. He's a sit as we move in to week 4. All right, next up we have the Broncos traveling to face the Jets, and we saw some life out of rookie quarterback Bo Nix in week 3. Ran for a touchdown, has not thrown a touchdown on the season yet, but he did not throw an interception in week 3. He has not fumbled on the season yet. So what are we going to get out of Bo Nix in week 4? I don't think it's going to be nearly as good. He's facing the Jets, and this defense really looks like it's starting to come together. So keep an eye on Bo Nix. Maybe the game plan worked in week 3. The Broncos look good to their credit. But, I mean, yeah, we're not starting Bo Nix, not even in like a deep super flex format. I mean, maybe week 5 against the Raiders if he plays good again in week 4. But we're still staying away from Bo Nix. We're staying away from Greg Dulcich. Didn't have a single target in week 3, and there's really no other tight end. I mean, Adam Trotman had a target and reception in week 3, but yeah, we're staying far away. Nate Adkins, I'm sorry, also had a target, but yeah, we're not starting any Broncos tight ends anytime soon. Don't think that really needed to be said, but just in case, let's move on. All right, Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, on the other hand, I think are both going to be in the stream category when we look at Rodgers and fellow teammate Tyler Conklin. So Conklin started to get some targets, ran some seam routes, starting to get involved here in this Jets offense. This Jets offense as a whole starting to warm up, gel a little bit more, open up a little bit. So Rodgers close to the start category this week. But then again, the Broncos defense actually played well in week 3. Rodgers had 21 fantasy points in week 3. But outside of that, he has not had more than 15 points on the season yet. So Rodgers, a good streaming option, I think, but I'm going to leave him at that. Not ready to call him a start. And while Conklin was much more involved in week 3, not ready to call him a sure start either. I do like him as a streaming candidate for sure, but, week 1, 1.6 points. Week 2, 2 points. Week 3, 14.3. We got to see more of a consistent pattern, but both are good streams in week 4. All right, let's move along to the Vikings traveling to face The Packers, Sam Darnold has a knee bruise. He's not expected to miss any time. Sam Darnold, at the time of recording this, is the QB2 in fantasy, ladies and gentlemen. He's in the start category. Liked him last week as well, but he's still kind of been like a streaming candidate since week 1 for me. Fortunately, if you guys did need a streaming candidate, I've had Darnold as a streaming candidate every single week so far in the season, but he's just elevated to the start. I mean, 4 passing touchdowns in week 3, 23 fantasy points. We've all seen it. There's nothing else to see. Even with Jordan Addison out, even with Hawkinson out, JJ's balling, Jalen Naylor's been great. This offense is going to be even better when Hawkinson and Addison do return at their respective timelines. And Aaron Jones has been great, so the defense fantastic. No reason to not consider Sam Darnold anything but a start this week. Johnny Munt did have a touchdown in week 3. Let's hand it to him. 7.2 fantasy points, but 3.5, 3.2, 7.2 are his marks in fantasy. Not enough here for my guy Johnny Munt just yet. He remains a sit. Okay, we don't know if Jordan Love's going to play for the Packers this week. We don't know if Malik Willis is going to get another start. It's an important matchup for the Packers, who are now 2-1 on the season here in week 4. First divisional matchup of the season thus far. So it will be interesting to see if they push Jordan Love to try and get him ready to play. I know apparently he almost played in week 3, but they've won 2 games now with Malik Willis at quarterback. So it's a home game. Tough matchup. This Vikings defense, best in the league right now. I still think if Jordan Love plays, I'm not ready to start him. I mean, I think if it was a better matchup, like week 5, they get the Rams. Week 6, they get the Cardinals. 7, they get the Texans. Like, I'd be okay against those teams, but I don't know that I want to start Jordan Love fresh off of injury against this Vikings defense. If you're desperate, sure. But then again, we don't even know if Jordan Love's going to play this week. So Malik Willis, let's hand it to him. 25.3 fantasy points in week 3 against Tennessee. Not taking anything away from him. Great on the ground. Was good on the ground in week 2 as well. Has thrown a touchdown in each start. Not taking anything away from Malik Willis here. I mean, it may be in the right format, superflex double quarterback, you're desperate. Sure, I'm not going to completely count Malik Willis out if he's a starter this week. But against his Vikings defense, I don't feel good about it, you know. So Love's a sit, Malik Willis is a sit, and Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave are both going to be sits as they combined for 4 targets last week. And Tucker Kraft is listed as questionable, dealing with an injury at the moment. So we'll see what happens. But the main point here is Sam Darnold might be set for an MVP season. We'll see what happens. All right, next up we will have the Steelers traveling to face the Colts. Tale of 2 stories when we look at these defenses, and Justin Fields and this Steelers offense starting to slowly open up a bit more, be utilized the correct way. We saw Fields run for a touchdown and throw for a touchdown. He did throw his first pick of the season as well. The Chargers defense, very stout that he faced in week 3. So Fields is up in that streaming category, especially against this Colts defense and the way they've played the last 2 weeks or so. I like Fields this week. If you don't have anything better, he's out there on the waiver wire. I mean, he's sitting at 27% roster the time recording this. So I think Fields is a solid stream this week. I like him. And then Pat Freiermuth, I mean, I guess you could have in like the streaming area, but I think most people drafted him, and I think he's just a start if you own him. If you have a better tight end on your team, yeah, start them. But, you know, Freiermuth, 6.7, 7.9, 7.3. He's a tight end 9 right now, the time recording this. It's not great by any stretch, but that's how bad the tight end position is at the time recording this. Pat Freiermuth is the tight end 9 with those fantasy marks. So if you don't have anything better, you're probably just going to have to start Pat Freiermuth. And do I feel great about that? No, but at least there's somewhat of a safe floor moving into the week. And at least the Colts defense has not played well. Colts offense also not playing so great right now outside of Jonathan Taylor. And guys, I got Anthony Richardson as a sit this week. The first time I've got him as a sit. I mean, this might be a bit controversial, and I don't know what other options you have if you own Anthony Richardson. Maybe you can go out and pick up Sam Darnold in time. Maybe you have a player like Derek Carr or Baker Mayfield on your team. I don't know. I think I would start those guys over Anthony Richardson against the Steelers defense, even at home this week. 5 interceptions in the last 2 games. His last 2 games have combined for 19 fantasy points. Combined. Okay? So 12.8 and 7.8. So I don't feel good about Anthony Richardson this week. We know the ceiling we saw in week 1 is 27 fantasy points, but I just don't know if I can do it against this Steelers defense and with the way he's played in the last 2 weeks. So you never know. Don't get me wrong. We could see Fields and Richardson both running all over the place this week, but I just don't want to risk it. I think we've been too kind in the past 2 weeks in terms of starts and sits with Anthony Richardson, and now he gets arguably the best defense in the league, maybe outside of the Vikings. So I'm going to sit Anthony Richardson this week unless you absolutely cannot afford to do so. Kylan Granson, whoever's left as a tight end on this team, they're in no way going to be considered starts this week. So let me know in the comments what you guys think about A-Rich this week, but I got him as a sit, and I do like Justin Fields this week. We'll see what happens in week 4. All right, let's move along to the Rams traveling to face the Bears, and Matthew Stafford is a sit for me this week, guys. I mean, he's been on the streaming radar, and I even thought he was a decent stream last week with the way the Niners defense have been playing. But, just overall with the depleted pass catchers, no return in sight for Puka or Cooper Kupp, and not taking anything away from some of these, wide receivers like Demarcus Robinson and Jordan Whittington and Tutu Atwell, Tyler Johnson. Like, these guys are playing fine, but they don't really offer any true upside. And I don't know that they're going to offer that in terms of pass catchers against the Bears. Colby Parkinson has done next to nothing at the tight end position. A little bit better last week. It was okay week 1, bad week 2. But, this Sean McVay offense is led by Kyren Williams right now. And once again, I'm not taking anything away from Matthew Stafford. He's not even particularly playing bad football. Week 1 he was good. Week 3 he was good. But you just can't trust him in fantasy. That's the point that we're trying to make here, and that's at the end of the day what this is. So we're going to set Matthew Stafford. We're going to set Colby Parkinson. Then we're going to look at the Bears facing this Rams defense that's been awful, and I think we have 2 good stream candidates. So now Caleb Williams is rostered in 67% of leagues, but he's been a guy who maybe people didn't drop, or maybe they went ahead and dropped after a 7.2 and 9.3 fantasy mark in the first 2 games of the season, and showed some life last week against that bad Colts defense. 19.3 fantasy points, still had 2 picks, but also threw for 2 touchdowns. And yeah, he had the lost fumble. There's still problems, but he did throw for 363 passing yards. So I think Caleb Williams against the Rams is a solid stream. I don't think there's anything crazy about that. I mean, it has been a very bumpy road to start the season, to say the least, but Caleb Williams, who gets the Rams this week, then the Panthers, then the Jaguars, then the Commanders after their Week 7 bye, and then the Cardinals. A very good stretch of games. We should start to see some overall improvement from Caleb Williams. And while he's been hard to trust throughout the year, I really do feel good about Caleb Williams this week. And his line on Underdog is set at 217.5 total passing yards. He hit 363 last week. I would hit straight to Underdog and take the higher because this Rams defense is that bad. And don't forget, if you guys are new to Underdog, you can sign up using promo code The Catch to get your free pick 'em for the week. Combine that with the over on Caleb Williams' total passing yards and automatically triple your cash entry. And on top of that, Underdog is giving all new users who sign up with promo code The Catch a 50% deposit match up to $1,000 on Underdog. So yes, the Rams are that bad defensively that I'm going to trust the over on Caleb Williams on Underdog this week. Go ahead and smash that line and earn some cash with that free pick'em using promo code The Catch. And hopefully that'll come with more and more improvement from Cole Kmet, who had 25.7 fantasy points in week 3, 11 targets, 10 receptions, 97 receiving yards, and a tutty. So Cole Kmet, due to the matchup, gets put on the streaming radar for the week. Probably going to be a bumpy ride, with Cole Kmet, but at the time of recording this, he's the tight end 4, even after hardly scoring 8 fantasy points through the first 2 games of the season. Gerald Everett had a target in week 3. That was it. So he's not even going to be mentioned on the screen, but he's a sit for sure. And let's move along. All right, next up we have the Eagles traveling to face the Buccaneers. Interesting matchup here. Okay, the Eagles like a low ceiling offense week 3 against the Saints, but they got the dub. Jalen Hurts, a pick and a fumble. 3.13 yards per carry, 311 passing yards, 11.9 fantasy points. Am I worried about Hurts? Not really, but I'm worried about Devonta Smith's health, and A.J. Brown's health because Britton Covey had stepped up in lieu of A.J. Brown in week 2, and then he got a shoulder injury in week 3, and he's going to miss about 6 weeks. So what does that leave if Smith, Brown, and Britton Covey are out? Johnny Wilson, Paris Campbell, Jahan Dotson. I don't feel great here about the pass-catching options for Jalen Hurts to throw to. So going to leave Jalen Hurts as a start, but maybe if you got someone else, you might consider it. I mean, even with that bad performance, Hurts is still the QB6 on the year at the time recording this. So I'm okay with Hurts, and we'll leave it at that, but be a little wary going into this week. Now, wow, the wide receiver room was depleted. That left plenty of opportunity for Dallas Goedert, who at the time of recording this is the tight end 1 in fantasy football. 11 targets, 10 receptions, 170 receiving yards, 17 yards per catch, 27 fantasy points in week 3. Massive performance. Came up big time. 7.1, 6.8 in weeks 1 and 2. Like basically my thesis with Goddard has been you own him, you start him, you take what you can get. At least there's a floor there. Tight end play has been awful this year. Goddard looks like he's going to get plenty of targets moving forward. So till further notice, I mean, even if Devonta Smith plays this week or A.J. Brown plays or both play, like we're still starting Dallas Goedert. And if they don't play, he's going to get a ton of volume in this game. Okay. Baker Moneymaker came back to earth in week 3, 9.5 fantasy points, a pick, 163 yards through the air, a touchdown, got sacked 7 times. All around bad performance by the Buccaneers. And yet Baker Mayfield is a QB3 at the time of recording this. So he's still in the start category because this Eagles defense has been really bad. They were better in week 3. Close game, low scoring game. Like I was really high on Derek Carr going in the week and he had a bad fantasy day. So maybe we should look at Baker in similar light this week. But if you need to start Baker, I'm still fine with it. If he plays bad again in week 4 here, then we can maybe take a closer look at what we need to do. But I've got Baker in the start category for now. If you want to consider him more of a stream category guy, that's fine as well. But I think he's okay this week. Cade Otton, good day in week 3, actually. 9.7 fantasy points, 8 targets, 7 receptions, 47 receiving yards. Did have a lost fumble. He made like the waiver wire video, and I was like, you know, he's 19% rostered. If you're in a bind, you could throw Cade Otton into your lineup, but he's probably going to end up having like 3 points this week because that's what Cade Otton does is he shows up, reminds us that he exists, and then he disappears for weeks again. So I'm going to leave Cade Otton as a sit moving into week 4. All right, next up we have the Patriots traveling to face the San Francisco 49ers. And no surprise here, Jacoby Brissett is going to be a sit. I mean, this Niners defense has been bad. Like, just straight up. They have not been good. They are not the Niners defense that we're used to right now heading into week 4 of the season. Maybe that changes. I don't know. But regardless, we're still not starting Jacoby Brissett, who has thrown 1 touchdown on the season. To Jacoby Brissett's credit, he has not turned the football over so far on the season. But 3.92 fantasy points in week 3. We're not starting him. Now, you may have been considering starting Hunter Henry, who I was like okay with in week 3, but I still try to remind you guys, like, if you don't see a touchdown or high volume out of these kind of streaming type tight ends, which I still think Hunter Henry is, then it could be a trap. And boy, oh boy, it was a trap in week 3. 2.9 fantasy points, and the game script was there. Like, the Patriots needed to throw the football, and there was just nothing there. 3 targets, 2 receptions, 9 receiving yards. So I got Hunter Henry as a sit. I mean, sure, you're absolutely desperate. You can roll the dice here, but I mean, gosh, tight end play this year has just been bad, and I do not feel good about Hunter Henry this week, so he's a sit for me. Moving along to the Niners. Encourage you guys to keep Brock Purdy in your starting lineups last week against the Rams. Paid off, 3 passing touchdowns, 41 yards on the ground, 292 yards through the air, 25.7 fantasy points. He's just a start for me. Aaron Rodgers just picked apart this defense. Don't get me wrong. Let's not get maybe too excited here. Purdy was not great in fantasy the first 2 weeks of the season against the Jets and the Vikings, but should be okay here against the Patriots. He is listed as questionable, dealing with a sore back. Last thing the Niners need is another injury, so let's keep an eye on it, but I think he's probably going to be good to go and play. In a weird scenario, if we see Brandon Allen or Josh Dobbs play, we're not starting them. Now, George Kittle did not play in week 3, dealing with that hamstring injury, was ruled out. If he plays this week, it's George Kittle. You still start him. If he doesn't play, Eric Sauber was okay, given the circumstances, 6.1 fantasy points off of 2 catches, but we're not going to consider him a start anytime soon. But, yeah, I mean, Kittle, if he plays, you just got to start him. The upside's too high. Purdy we'll keep an eye on. Then everything else here is going to end up being a sit for the week for me. Let's move along to the Commanders traveling to face the Cardinals. Reminder, of course, again, I have to record these early Monday. I'm sorry, Monday Night Football has not been played yet. I don't know how Jay Daniels looked against the Bengals or how Zach Ertz looked. They may have a lower ceiling in this game. I do think this is going to be a game where the Commanders are going to need to score points to keep up with the Bengals with how bad the Commanders' defense has been, at least through the first 2 weeks of the season. But regardless, even if Daniels or Ertz have a lower ceiling in week 3, it's a good matchup against the Cardinals. Zach Ertz probably maybe unfair to put him in the start category. But I think he's just a solid streaming option on a week-in, week-out basis at the position. So maybe he should be considered a stream, but I still think Zach Ertz is startable this week. And Jaden Daniels is kind of tough to evaluate at the time of recording this. 28 points, 13 points. See what happens, but Daniels is still probably a good upside play against the Cardinals in week 4. If my thoughts change or something drastic like an injury happens, it'll be in the pinned comment down below. Moving along to the Cardinals, Kyler Murray is going to stay in my starting lineup. I mean, 14 points, 28 points, 15 points. We've seen a ceiling, we've seen a floor, but this is the Washington Commanders. This is a team that Kyler can run against. This is a team he can throw against. He might have a performance close to what he did in week 2, and I was going to leave it at that. I think Kyler Murray is an absolute must-start player against this Commanders defense in week 4. Now, Trey McBride dealing with that concussion, currently in concussion protocol at the time recording this. We don't know for sure if he's going to play in week 4. If he does, he's a great start once again because this is the Commanders defense, one of the worst in the league. If he doesn't play, it looks like Elijah Higgins would be the next guy up. He's had one target in each game or at least one target in each game this year. He had 2 in week 1. He actually had a touchdown in week 2 against the Rams. Would I start him? No, not even. I mean, against the Commanders, maybe if there's nothing else out there because it's Commanders. But we'll have to see what happens with Trey McBride's health and if he plays this week, dealing with the concussion. Kyler, a great start, and I think both the Commanders, Jaden Daniels and Zach Ertz, probably decent starts in week 4. Let's move along to an interesting matchup. The Chiefs traveling to face the Chargers. Let's start with the Chiefs, and I'm going to leave Patrick Mahomes in the start category. Been a tough start for Mahomes. At the time of recording this, he's still a top 10 quarterback in fantasy football. I mean, the quarterback play has not been great this year. Tight end play has been awful. He at least had 17 fantasy points in week 3. He's at least thrown 2 touchdowns in the last 2 games, but he's also thrown a pick in every game to start the year. And this is a tough matchup against the Chargers. I mean, I don't think it's dramatic to say this could end up being Mahomes' worst game of the season, but it's Patrick Mahomes. It could also be his best game of the season. So I'm going to leave him in the start category. If it's a low enough ceiling again in week 4, going into week 5 against the Saints, we might have to start considering other options if you're a Patrick Mahomes owner. But we'll leave him as a start for now. Now, if you're a Travis Kelce owner, it might be time to start considering other options. I mean, what is the ceiling with Travis Kelce this year? I just don't know. I mean, got 5 targets, had 7 fantasy points, but this is Travis Kelce. This is not what we're used to seeing. I mean, I got to have him as a sit against this Chargers defense. I mean, it depends. What else do you have on your roster? There's no one else. Okay, maybe you still roll Travis Kelce out there. But this Chargers defense is nothing to sneeze at, man. They're one of the best in the league right now. I just don't feel good about Travis Kelce. I don't think I really need to explain this. This is a player you drafted in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round, depending on your league size and everything. And it just hasn't been there. I mean, he has been the tight end 1, 2, or 3 every year since 2016. And this has always been the fear in recent years. At some point, Kelce's going to fall off. Plus, this is the Chiefs. This is going to be a team making a push for the playoffs at the very worst, if not the Super Bowl. And they're going to try and preserve Travis Kelce throughout the regular season. So, plus you got new pass catchers on this team, although Hollywood is on IR and Xavier Worthy has barely had any targets. So, I don't know, man. I'm just going to leave Kelce as a sit, and I don't think I really need to explain that. So, let's move along to the Chargers. I've had Justin Herbert as a sit every single week on the season, even against teams like the Raiders and the Panthers. And he was an absolute sit for me last week against the Steelers. But, coming out of the offseason, Justin Herbert had the foot injury. Then he had he's dealing with the ankle injury. Then he re-aggravates the ankle injury against Pittsburgh. And it was an awful matchup last week against Pittsburgh anyways. So, is it going to be Herbert this week? We don't quite know at the time of recording this. X-rays have come back negative on his ankle. Are they going to risk him against Chris Jones and this Chiefs defense? I don't know. We'll find out. It is a home game for the Chargers. If they don't, it's going to be Taylor Heineke. I thought it was going to be Easton Stick, but it wasn't. It was Heineke. So maybe we see a bit of both. I don't know. Point being, I'm not starting any Chargers quarterback or any Chargers tight end. Not starting Hayden Hurst, 2 targets in week 3. Not starting Will Dissly, also 3 targets in 3 targets compared to Hayden Hurst, 2 targets in week 3. Not touching those guys, not touching any Chargers quarterbacks. Hope Justin Herbert has a good recovery if he needs it. And I mean, they have an early bye in week 5. It's tough because this is a divisional matchup, so they're probably going to push for Herbert to play. But, man, I think he really probably needs to rest, especially if Chris Jones coming through the middle of that offensive line. But see what happens. This might be a nitty-gritty game. I mean, it's going to be an interesting matchup. So a lot of sits here. Mahomes close to a sit. Give him one last shot here. All right, let's move along to the Browns traveling to face the Raiders. So Deshaun Watson just continues to be a sit in fantasy football. Has not had more than 16.4 fantasy points in a game so far this year. It's a good matchup against the Raiders, but I mean, he's faced the Cowboys, the Jaguars, and the Giants. Not necessarily steep matchups. So Watson, don't think I need to explain it. I mean, he was better last week through the air. 2 passing touchdowns, his best mark of the season, but then he fumbled twice. He's just a sit. I don't need to go through this. Jordan Atkins, okay last week with David Njoku out, but just 6.9 fantasy points. Not enough there to start him. And then David Njoku, on the other hand, his status for week 4 is unknown. If he plays, I think we can roll Njoku out there against the Raiders and in the following week against the Commanders. Good matchups for him. So if he's healthy, he's good to go. We can throw him out there, but we got to wait and see what happens throughout the week. Moving along, Gardner Minshew, just not enough here. Was starting to make some good throws in week 2 against the Ravens. They get a victory, and then just was not there in week 3. I mean, it was better fantasy-wise than week 1, but you could argue this was his worst performance of the season so far. I mean, a touchdown, a pick, 214 passing yards, 14.9 fantasy points. Don't need to break it down. We're not starting Gardner Minshew even in like Superflex double QB formats. Brock Bowers, his worst performance of the year so far in week 3. And, the matchup was there. It was a good matchup. The game script was there, so maybe a little bit concerned because he only walked away with 7.1 fantasy points. But Bowers is going to be fine. He's going to continue to be a player that we can start on a week in, week out basis. So don't overreact to that stat line. He's still been very solid in his rookie season. Let's keep Brock Bowers in our starting lineups. Maybe we're going to play David Njoku if he's healthy. Other than that, we got all sits across the board in this matchup. Moving along, we'll have the Bills traveling to face the Ravens. Once again, a reminder, I got to record these early Monday. I'm sorry. I have not watched Monday Night Football yet. It has not happened. Don't know how Josh Allen looked against the Jaguars or the tight ends for the Bills. So if my opinion changes or an injury happens, it'll be in the pinned comment down below. But for the most part, week in, week out, we got to start Josh Allen. We got to start Dalton Kincaid. Let's hope we get a higher ceiling out of Kincaid. Josh Allen, high ceiling week 1, low ceiling week 2. Game script wasn't there week 2. Their run game, James Cook was all over the place. It doesn't matter. It's Josh Allen as a start, no matter what. Dawson Knox maybe has a big game Monday Night Football, but it's probably not going to change my opinion because it's been very up and down. 2 targets week 1. None in week 2. We don't need to really break this down. We're not starting Dawson Knox. Moving along, Lamar Jackson is a weekly starter as well, no matter what. His best fantasy performance of the season in week 3 against the Cowboys, 25.9 fantasy points. He's currently the QB1 at the time of recording this in fantasy football. 87 yards on the ground, a touchdown on the ground, a touchdown through the air. Lamar Jackson ran all over the place like a madman. I don't know if he's going to be able to do that against the Bills, but Lamar Jackson, week in, week out, starter. We're not questioning it, but we got to start questioning these Ravens tight ends. I got both Mark Andrews, and for those of you who spent half your free agent bidding on Isaiah Likely, I got Isaiah Likely as a sit as well. We just got to get consistent stat lines here. Andrews 9.1 in week 2, Likely 26.1 in week 1. Other than that, neither player has scored more than 4.6 on the season. Andrews, 0. Goose egg, week 3. So, the game script was here. Dallas coming from behind, but the Ravens just ran the football down that Cowboys run defense's throats. And, you saw 25 touches of Derrick Henry, and then you saw Lamar rush for 14 total times. So, I don't know if that's going to be the game plan in week 4. Maybe we do see more involvement out of Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, but are you going to risk it in your starting lineup? I just don't know, because in week 2 against the Raiders, the game script was there, and we did see more output from Mark Andrews. Then we didn't see a great game out of Isaiah Likely, so I just can't trust these guys in my starting lineups or your starting lineup, so they are both going to be sits for me moving into week 4. All right, that will bring us to the Titans traveling to face the Dolphins. So, boy, oh boy, this is a sit across the board. Maybe not fair that I kind of singled out the Dolphins and said to sit everyone, and then I actually typed out the Titans players here, but it's a sit across the board. Will Levis, can't trust him, can't start him. He is a lost fumble and a pick in every game so far on the season, and 2 picks in 2 out of the 3 games on the season so far. Chicken Conquo, can't trust him. Josh Weil, 8.3 in week 3, but you still can't trust him. I don't need to break this down. It's not even that bad of a matchup against the Dolphins, but we don't need to break this down. It's a sit across the board for the Titans. Then we got Tim Boyle coming in relief for Skylar Thompson, dealing with a rib injury. Are they going to throw Tyler Huntley out there from the practice squad? Are they going to start Tim Boyle? Are they going to sign Mike White or Ryan Tannehill? Is Tom Brady going to come out of retirement because no one wants to listen to him during a broadcast of a game? Play for the Dolphins? I don't know. But I think regardless, we're sitting all Dolphins quarterbacks in every format, no matter what. Jonnu Smith, 3.8 fantasy points in week 3. He's a sit. Any other skill position player associated with this Dolphins team, maybe outside of Devon Achane or maybe Tyreek Hill, is a sit until further notice. And that'll bring us to our last matchup of the week. We got the Seahawks traveling to face the Lions, and Geno Smith is still in the stream category for me. Disappointing performance in week 3 and a good matchup against the Dolphins. He threw 2 picks. He had a fumble. Wasn't a lost fumble, but still a fumble. Threw a touchdown, 289 passing yards, 13.3 fantasy points. If the turnovers weren't there, that this would have been a good day for Geno Smith. 18.8 week 1, 17.8 week 2, but this Lions secondary, not very good. They are good against the run defensively. So I think Geno Smith, you don't have better options. You could roll him out there in like double quarterback super flex. He's okay as a QB2, but I don't expect a very high ceiling. Time I'm recording this, even with that bad performance in week 3, he's still a top 10 quarterback in fantasy football. So he's okay. Don't prefer him, but it's tough pickings out here at the QB position so far on the year. Noah Fant, a good day in week 3, 12 fantasy points, 6 targets, 6 receptions, 60 receiving yards, but it goes 3.1, 2.4, 12. This reminds me of Kate Otten. Like I put Noah Fant in the waiver wire video. Like I told you guys, Noah Fant, Kate Otten, like they remind us that they exist and they completely disappear again. So you'd have to be really desperate in a deeper league to start Noah Fant. Don't want to say he's completely unstartable, but he's still pretty close. I do not trust him whatsoever, even against the Lions. So Noah Fant, going to be a sit for me. And we'll move along to the Lions, who at the quarterback and tight end position, I've got sits across the board here. Now, Sam Laporta dealing with a low ankle sprain. He might not miss this game, but he might miss it. It's really like we don't have any idea at the time of recording this. So that would leave Brock Wright, who was okay in relief. 5 targets, 4 receptions, 34 receiving yards, 7.4 fantasy points. I just think right now, Laporta, Brock Wright, these guys are going to be touchdown dependent. I just can't trust either player right now. Laporta has not had more than 8.5 fantasy points, 3.3 in week 2, 5.6 in week 3. I mean, he was playing okay. 2 targets, 2 receptions, 36 receiving yards before he had to exit the game. So I don't know. I just don't trust these Lions tight ends, and I don't trust Jared Goff right now. It was a great matchup in week 3, and he only had 15 fantasy points, threw a pick, did throw 2 touchdowns, but only threw 199 passing yards. So 12.3, 10.7, 15.5. That's where we're at with Goff so far on the season. This run game is dominant for the Lions. The defense very good at stopping the run, and that's about it in terms of the identity outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown and for the most part Jameson Williams on this team as a whole. So Goff's got to be a sit for me. Gets downgraded from that kind of like streaming area. Gave a one last shot against this Cardinals defense in week 3, but he's a sit for me as we approach week 4. And that'll do it for today's video. There's every quarterback, every tight end, for every matchup as we approach week 4 of the season. Don't forget, guys, I will answer every fantasy football question in the comments down below. So if you guys need anything whatsoever moving into week 4 of the season, please drop it down below. I'll answer every comment before Thursday Night Football and then before Sunday's slate of games as well. And don't forget, we're going to have everything that you guys need for week 4 of the season here on the channel. Start sits at every single position, running backs and wide receivers that you can't afford to bench, buy low video, must start kickers, must start defenses, waiver wire video at the beginning and at the end of the week, as well as live Q&A throughout the week. So make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel so that you don't miss out on any of the content as the week goes on. You guys will see the playlist and the videos start to pop up. As the week goes on, I'll link all those videos down below, and you guys will probably see the playlist and videos pop up any moment here as well. So make sure you guys check out all the content for the week. And with that, I'll say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening, and remember, you saw it here on The Catch.